Launching. Hello, everyone. Today I'm here with Sean Pink, or Dancing Sean. We're going to be talking about Better Call Saul season 6. But before we dive into Better Call Saul, the finale season, we're going to be discussing exactly what Better Call Saul is in general and what topics we're going to be talking about. So in general, in Better Call Saul, there are, for one, it's a masterpiece of a show, but they use a lot of different things like visual, and we'll be talking about like what's visually shown on the screen, like editing and cinematography. The sound design, like the music they choose, or the editing and sound effects that they use. To story and narrative, there's a lot of characters in Better Call Saul, and I think that's what makes it so good. And we're going to be diving into each of those characters. Or was character, like dialogue and performances. So first, this is Dancing Sean. Sean, introduce yourself if people don't know who you are.
I'm Sean. I'm a big fan of film and TV and movies included. And I've been doing a podcast with History of Westeros, covering Game of Thrones and that whole world and those books and everything for several years now. And I'm dipping into like movie reviews and really love Better Call Saul. I think it's one of the best shows ever made. I think it's best show that's on TV right now, and I think it's a top 5, maybe top 3 all-time show. I can't go on enough about it,
Mhm.
and I'm happy that Flint here is also excited about it, and we get a chance to talk about it. And if anyone's, I guess I should say one thing: if anyone has not seen Better Call Saul, we're totally gonna spoil it. Don't only
Absolutely.
watch this if you've already seen it and you really care about it, because we're definitely gonna. I mean, I guess I will point out. I think if something is really great, it's hard to spoil. Even if you know some plot point that's going to end up happening, it doesn't take away from how good the actors did or how good the set
Absolutely.
design was or all these other elements to make something good. You'll still get a lot of emotional impact and be impressed by the whole production if you watch it, even if you know how it's going to end or what happens or whatever. However, I guess if you watch this and get spoiled, but it inspires you to watch it, I guess that's still a good thing.
Yes.
um,
First on the agenda, before we dive into season 6, the finale season, people probably need to get a recap or understand how season 6 even started. There's so much that's going on in the show. It originally broke off, or is a spinoff from Breaking Bad. If people didn't know, I assume you do if you watch this, Better Call Saul. But in general, it
Can
came
I
from.
say real quick, Flint?
Yes, yes.
That almost like adds to my opinions about spoilers. Is that for a lot of this, we kind of know what's going to happen because this is a
Yes,
prequel, right? This
exactly.
Breaking Bad was a huge success as a show, and when it ended, the 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 producers, the writers, the people involved in the show had this idea to do a spin-off. Walter White in Breaking Bad. I'm assuming you've seen that, but
Yes,
I'm rambling a little bit. But sorry, I think that even if you haven't seen Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul stands on its own. You
yes.
can still watch it, and it'll be a good show on its own. But it was inspired by this sleazy lawyer that Walter White got. There was an episode where one of Walter's henchmen, if you will, got arrested, and he realized that he's going to need a lawyer. There's going to be troubles with the law if he's trying to have this
Mm-hmm.
multi-million drug cartel enterprise going on. He's trying to keep it hidden from his wife. He's got to embezzle money. There's going to be law involved. He's going to need a lawyer. And Jesse brings him to this lawyer, this two-bit ambulance chaser in a shopping mall, and Walter's like, what, this is the guy? We need a professional, we need someone serious. This is the guy that you're bringing me to, Jesse? And Jesse's like, look, you don't understand. This guy got so and so off and so and
Mm-hmm.
so off. He knows the deal. He can get what we need done. You don't need a criminal lawyer, you need a criminal lawyer.
Yes.
And so then we get introduced to this Saul Goodman character, and they had the idea that he was so interesting and dynamic to kind of spin off a show to see how he got to be in his position.
Yes.
What's the background of this lawyer character? And that's what we get here is in this show, Better Call Saul. And the thing is, it's more than just about him, right? I have
Absolutely.
started thinking lately that it's as much about the people who better call Saul than about Saul himself,
That's true.
and Oh, so anyway, I didn't mean to cut you off, Eric, but
No.
I did just realize you're kind of setting up where the show came from,
Yes.
and that kind of tied into my idea of like spoilers that like we kind of know, at least for a lot of the characters, what's going to end up happening,
Yes,
but we're
that's
still
true.
riveted. We're on the edge of our seats to see how it plays out, and there's characters involved that weren't in Breaking Bad, so we're not sure what's going to happen with them. So
absolutely. So, in general, you know, like Sean was saying, you know, Better Call Saul was off of Breaking Bad, which, especially for its time, you know, Walking Dead and Game of Thrones was out, and the show came out of nowhere. It felt like, and it blew people's minds. And you know, one of the things that made Breaking Bad so well was just not the character development; it was how they used color. It's how they did cinematography. It's like everything that you learn in film school, they just implemented it. Like it was like a must for them, and they did it really, really well. And then they made the spinoff, and everything they learned doesn't like go to shit. They just improved. Everything just became better, you know, and that's what's tricky. You know, you would think that it would be hard to like almost like make a better series than Breaking Bad, and they did it. I feel. Sean agrees. You know that.
I think one thing that they did in Breaking Bad, it was particularly outstanding, is that they had a sort of a long-term plan for things.
Yes.
And they were really careful to keep every little seed they had planted in mind. They had this very well cultivated garden, and everything in there was there for a reason, and that little hints and clues and setups from season, you know, from episode 5 of season 1 would come back into play in episode 7 of season 4. You know, that everything was like tied together really well. They had this very good vision. They were very consistent and logical with how the characters behaved and how the plot flowed. And in addition to that, they were approaching it, as you said, from a very cinematic
like
approach. They were approaching it from allow myself to introduce myself. That's an Austin Powers reference. Sorry. Anyway, they didn't just have this plot and these characters and it kind of showed you what happened. They did it in a stylish cinematic way. They were taking great care to think about like what camera angle they were using and how much lighting was in a scene and what kind of clothes the characters were wearing and stuff like that. And I you know, I don't want to be too negative, but you know, Eric, you said they did a great job. I think they did a good job. I think Better Call Saul, they're doing a great job. I think little ideas they had in Breaking Bad became like fully fleshed plans from the get-go.
Yeah.
I think that their use of color in Breaking Bad was kind of sporadic. I think they had this idea for it and they used it sometimes, but they didn't have the full plan worked out. They weren't paying attention to it in every cut of every scene. But in Better Call Saul, they are. It's a very specific use of colors, part of how they're telling the story. It conveys, once you realize that you can't not see it, and you'll realize that it's a clue to where things are going. It's a indication of a character's intentions, and it's more than just like decor in the background. It's actually as much part of the storytelling as if a narrator told you what a character was thinking or something like that.
Right,
integral
absolutely.
to the whole thing.
So really fast, I want to talk about the backstory of before season 6, basically, when it comes down to it. So the main character, obviously, is Saul, who is Jimmy, and he has a brother who was never in Breaking Bad. We never heard of him, which was named. God, I should know this. What's the brother's name?
Chuck.
Chuck. Thank you.
Chuck McGill.
So I feel like we should talk about this really fast.
I want to clarify too, because it might get a little confusing, that Jimmy McGill was Chuck McGill's brother. Chuck McGill's a lawyer, and Jimmy ends up becoming a lawyer. Of course, that's where this comes from. But at one point during the course of the show, he decides to change his name. And there's a whole story behind that.
Yes.
But when he changes his name to Saul Goodman, which is like a playoff, it's all good, man. You know, it's almost like a joke. But anyway, it's worth clarifying that if we say Jimmy or Saul, we're talking about the same person, you know.
Yes.
Maybe he's evolved, maybe he's a different persona, but it's the same person, you know.
So what are your feelings on Saul and Chuck's relationship? Because obviously that affects who Saul becomes. partially of why he becomes Saul versus Jimmy. I feel.
Yeah, it's complicated and something to keep in mind. Something that the creators of Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad do is they put in a protagonistic scenario characters who aren't really that protagonistic. We want to root for Saul or Jimmy,
Yeah.
but man, he's been a burglar, he's lied, he's done all kinds of things that are both illegal and immoral.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow he's still so charismatic. We relate to his struggles. We feel bad for the wrongs that have been done to him, that we find ourselves wanting to justify his actions and root
Mm-hmm.
for him anyway. And a lot of that starts with Chuck. We see through the course of the show, a lot of it through flashbacks and stories and relationships and like the concurrent timeline, which at this point with Chuck is a couple years past.
Yes.
But we see that Chuck was like the golden child growing up,
Mm-hmm.
but that Jimmy was treated like the golden child by his parents. Like Chuck actually like buckled down and worked hard, went to law school, did what he's supposed to do, became successful. Whereas Jimmy was running around running scams, like conning people out of money. Yeah, he was stealing money from his own parents. But for some reason, his parents seem to love him more than Chuck. Is kind of the feel we get, and there's this sort of like a animosity, a jealousy that Chuck has. He's
Mm-hmm.
like frustrated that Jimmy had his parents' affection, even though he was doing bad things. And one way this plays out is Chuck holding Jimmy back. To
Right.
be fair, Chuck helps Jimmy out a lot
Hey, random
also.
gamer boy. We got a person that said, "Hello, it's been a while." Yeah, we're talking about Better Call Saul, season 6. But even before we dive into season 6, which is the finale season, we're talking about the characters and how they got to season 6. One of the characters is Jimmy. Another character is Chuck, random guy. But anyways, that's what we're talking about right now. You can continue, Sean.
If we've got a new person coming in, I feel the need to warn them we're totally going to spoil it, so be aware. But also that it's a great show. There's a reason we're talking about it.
Mhm.
And maybe what we talk about, if we spoil a little bit, will inspire you to watch it. We just had a little discussion about how even if you might know some plot point, it doesn't take away from the performances and the set design and the director's efforts and everything else. So anyway, Chuck, in some ways helps Jimmy out. Like
Yes.
we see that in the past when Jimmy got in trouble with the law, Chuck came to save him. But eventually, when Jimmy kind of straightens himself out and he becomes a lawyer himself and
Mhm.
he has a job at Chuck's law firm, but Chuck does not like the idea of this. He knows how mischievous Jimmy can be and is worried that Jimmy with a law degree will be even more trouble than Jimmy,
Mhm.
running some con at a bar or something. And so behind the scenes, we learn over the first season or so that Chuck is working against Jimmy. At
Yes.
first, Howard, another central character in the show,
Yes.
it seems like he is holding Jimmy back, but he's one of Chuck's partners, and Howard is really acting on Chuck's behalf, holding Jimmy back.
He's playing
And
the
it was a
villain.
great moment, right? It was a really great moment in the show that the writers kind of hid from us
Mhm.
that Howard is actually a good guy. It made it seem like he was a bad guy, and then we realized all along, actually, Chuck's the bad guy, Howard's a good guy.
Which I want to go into Howard a little bit later, because I feel bad for Howard a lot of the times.
Yeah, me too.
But we'll discuss Howard a little bit later.
Let me say real quick, Eric. You said that there are a lot of characters in the show. I think it's worth pointing out some of the
They're
central
central.
characters.
Yeah. We're not going to go over, like, there's a guy who Mike gets involved with. He's like a minor character. He's really funny, kind of, I feel, but we're not going to go over him. We're going to go over Mike. We're going to go over Saul. We're going to go over Kim, Howard. Chuck's very important also. So there are central characters
that talk about Gus and Nacho.
Nacho. Yes, yeah. Gus, Nacho. Correct.
6-ish central characters that we need to touch bases on at least, and Howard is one of them. Well, let me see if I can briefly introduce a bunch of them.
Yeah.
There's Jimmy / Saul, of course, and his brother Chuck, and Howard, who is Chuck's partner.
Yes.
They're all lawyers, so they're kind of in connection.
Kim.
Kimmy, who is Saul's romantic interest and also a lawyer who at different points they've all worked with or for each other. Then there is Nacho, who is mixed up in
The
the
cartel.
drug cartel meth operation. He's connected to the Salamancas.
Mhm.
And
Which the
then there's
Salamancas are important, but we may refer to
and
them
there's a
as a
bunch of different
generals.
Salamancas.
Yes.
We might get to certain ones at some point, but I don't want to get all the different ones.
Yes.
But then there's Gus, who is also in the drug cartel meth industry, and he is a
pretty much like a mob boss, but he's not.
yeah, he's sort of like a second in command. He's not a central character at all, but there's this guy that we know, Don Eladio, who's kind of in charge of like the Mexican mafia, for lack of a better phrase.
Yes.
And they're all working on distributing meth around Mexico and the Southwest. Man, I realize I'm using my hands and arms a lot.
That's fine.
And Gus and Hector Salamanca are like in this second tier under Don Eladio, and they're pitted against each other. Again, there's all kinds of details around that. Some of that is still spilling into Breaking Bad when it gets to that part of the storyline. But anyway, Nacho is originally part of the structure under the Salamancas, but ends up being blackmailed under threat or extorted. I can't think of the right word, but they're threatening Nacho's father. Gus is threatening Nacho's father to make him work as like a double agent against the Salamancas for Gus.
And then there's Mike.
Then Mike is a kind of a broken man. He was a cop who was mixed up in some corruption, and it ends up getting his son killed, and he hasn't really like forgiven himself or moved past that. And he ends up getting mixed up with Saul and the Salamancas and Gus, and eventually he's worked his way to be sort of a right-hand man of Gus.
I think he's like the most pragmatic character.
Most what? Pragmatic?
Yeah, like I feel like he's so realistic about situations, and he's like, it needs to go this way, or if it doesn't, things will go sour. And he likes to get involved a lot. Like, he's not like someone who's in the background. He's like, you should just do this. He's like, have me on the scene. I'll make sure everything gets done properly. I don't know how they handle his character. I love, but anyway.
Lots of the characters are very good at thinking forward. Lots of them are very good about understanding what's going on in a situation and how it needs to go for them or their organization to be successful, the problems that might be tripped up, how to address those problems. I mean, like, I think that Jimmy, Kim, Gus, Mike, they all do this,
That is true.
And that's one thing that's interesting, to see all these different characters with these backgrounds and motivations kind of coming at these issues that they get mixed up in. And one thing about maybe Mike or Gus that's pragmatic but maybe dark is sometimes the answer is someone needs to die, needs to die in order for us to not get in trouble with the law, or in order for us to make millions of dollars off these drugs, or in order for us to exact revenge on this person that wronged us or whatever. We have to kill this person, and it's sometimes it can be almost psychopathic how Gus or Mike even can just coldly make this decision and enact it. And we I think, as much as seeing Saul grow into this shady lawyer, we see Mike grow into this cold-hearted assassin through the course of this show, So anyway, that is a little bit of a tangent to touch on some of the characters involved, which we incidentally also end up talking about some of the background plot surrounding those characters. Is there a more
I think that's it.
That you wanted to cover from the past, or how it led up to where we're at now?
Well, I think we should briefly break that down. Yeah. Then the plot, and maybe some of the themes they decided to use, because themes could come over to season 6, for example. Like if they have like an overall theme of Better Call Saul, or plot. Definitely plot. Like we need to talk about exactly how the characters got to season 6, at least in a general aspect.
So let's see. It's I don't know. It's hard to go over generally without starting to get caught up in certain details. I'm going to make an attempt. If you think I'm going on too much of a tangent, or if you think I left something key out, let me know.
Yeah.
But one thing that kicks it all off, like in the first episode of the first season, we see that Jimmy is
a lawyer. Actually, before we get into this,
what's that?
Before we get into this, so the show does a great job of making things realistic, so much so that Jimmy, being a lawyer, they do the research. Like the writers do their actual research, and it doesn't feel fake to the point that even lawyers who have watched the show give it props. All right, that is exactly how it feels to be in a lawyer or to deal with the situation. And I want to give props to that because some shows just don't handle that. I feel like right, and it feels off. And sometimes even for us, we're like audiences who aren't a special, in that specialty of field, like a lawyer or whatever. They'd be like in the back of their head, like something just feels off. But I think they do a great job of handling the situations of like the career, of people's careers or stuff like that. But anyways, I just want to go say that before we dive into the Jimmy's lawyer thing.
Yeah, I think that carries over to a lot of things about the show. They put
Yes.
a great attention to detail into almost everything that they're doing. They're very realistic about, someone pointed out that there was a few times when someone is using a quarter for one reason or another, like they're putting quarters into a phone booth or something. I think it was one of the actors on the show pointed out, because you don't necessarily even see it in the show. But since the show is set, I mean, it spans a few years, but it's set, like 2004-ish, okay? All the quarters were from like 1997, 2001, 19. They
That's
made sure to
awesome.
get quarters from that time period. Like
So that
they're
feels
super attention to detail.
that's amazing. I don't even think I would have thought of that if I was on.
Not just the idea that they make sure to have phone booths in the background because cell phones weren't quite as pervasive. You know what I mean? But they even goes to the point of like the quarters are from the right year. It's a great attention to detail.
It really is.
I know I'm gonna break off and start talking about color eventually.
Yeah, and that is something we are definitely going to go over.
Of their attention to detail. But okay, so let's see. They start off with Jimmy. Another thing they do too is they kind of like slow roll. They kind of like slowly reveal things to us. Something is on the screen. They did this in Breaking Bad too. You remember a lot of times they would have like the opening scene. We were like, "What is this?" You have like that teddy bear floating in the water.
Yes.
And then like a season later, we're like, "Oh, that's what that is." They do a really good job of like planting clues. They almost have like these little short films that
In
end up
the intro.
It seem like out of nowhere, but suddenly become super meaningful.
Yes.
That's something they do commonly. But anyway, the point is sometimes they hide from us the reality of things, which was the case in the beginning. It seems like when they present Saul that he's kind of this scammy lawyer, and it seems like he's maybe trying to take advantage of his brother. We don't fully understand. We don't even know the characters Howard and Chuck and everyone yet. And he's like going to Howard trying to like get money for his brother, and it seems like he's trying to like get some money or maybe blackmail him, some kind of scheme. We're not sure what's going on, but then we get introduced to Chuck, who is Jimmy's brother, who seems to be like this revered, respected, successful lawyer, but he's had some sort of mental breakdown. He just has it in his mind that he's allergic to electricity. So he's like got everything in his house is turned off. He won't let people bring in phones to the house or any electronic devices. Like it's kind of a point of the plot eventually that this is kind of psychosomatic. It's not an actual physical thing, but he believes that it is, and that's enough for it to matter.
Yes.
Anyway, it becomes clear that Jimmy Saul truly is trying to help his brother Chuck.
Yes.
Even though over time we find out that there's trouble between them, that Chuck is working against Jimmy. Eventually, Chuck gives Jimmy good reasons to be very mad at him, but at least in this moment, Jimmy is very genuinely helping, protecting Chuck. And in the meantime, a key thing that ends up getting tied back into this season is the Kettlemans. Is a case that Jimmy is trying to get as a lawyer. He's got like an office out of the back of like a nail salon or something. He's really just scraping to get by, and he's looking for some kind of payday, and he comes across this accountant who's accused of embezzling money, and he's trying to get their case, but they end up going to Howard. Howard and Chuck's law firm, HHM, Hamlin McGill, Howard Hamlin. Okay. And so when Jimmy is going there to talk to Howard about money for his brother, which to be clear, Howard is not holding back. Howard is trying to keep Chuck having his job. Howard is trying to keep there from being a payout because he believes Chuck's going to get better. Again, we're not quite sure in the beginning how to think about these characters and relationships, but we come to realize that both Chuck and Howard, both Jimmy and Howard both do have Chuck's best interest in mind. But anyway, when Jimmy goes to Howard,
Mhm.
he sees the Kettlemans there, and that this big Hamlin, big old law firm is getting this case that he was trying to get. It's going to be his big break, but the big law firm that barely knows or cares is going to get, and he's frustrated.
Is this
So he
the
comes up Kettlemans.
Texans? Like, is it this the guy? Is the Kettleman's a character where there's like a guy the there's like a pair
It's a husband and wife.
yeah,
They're the
yeah,
ones.
and one of them Texan,
Yep.
right? Is one of them Texan?
Texan?
Yeah, like he has a Texan accent,
No,
like
no. I think
tall,
you're
bald
thinking of someone
guy.
else. No, no.
Yeah,
Different.
that's different. Okay,
No.
I
The
had to clarify
Kettlemans
that
were the
because
one that Kim went to, with the Statue of Liberty and the trailer, and she went there.
okay, yes, yeah, okay,
That's the
got it.
Kettlemans, okay? And in that first episode, what Jimmy does is just another like humorous coincidence that happens is these two skateboard kids jump in front of Jimmy's car, pretend to be injured.
Mhm.
Something that Jimmy used to do. His nickname when he was younger was Slippin' Jimmy. This is a scam he used to run. Pretend to be injured, threaten to sue, and then get someone to just pay him $400 instead of going through a lawsuit.
Mhm.
So here these two skateboard kids try to do this to Jimmy. And he's like, you chose the wrong person. First of all, I'm a lawyer. Second of all, I know this scam. I used to do it. Third of all, look at my car. How much money do you think I have? Jimmy drives this beat up old car, you know? So, but what he decides to do is use these skateboarders to jump in front of the Kettleman's car. And he's going to show up, save the day, and use this as an angle to get their case for the embezzlement, right?
Mhm.
I'm going on about this way more than I meant to, but I think it's important because it sets out so much stuff. Okay.
Yes, because the Kettlemans are
what
still
ends up
relevant.
happening- Yes.
So.
Just another coincidental setup. And I want to take a tangent here to say that I don't mind weird coincidences and chances to set things up.
Yes.
I don't think it's good to resolve plots, but it's good to set them up.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of them in this opening episode of Better Call Saul. The second one being that when these skateboarders and Saul, what happens when they jump in front of the car, it's someone else. This is someone else with the same car, some old Spanish lady, and they like flip out. They follow her home. Jimmy's like on the phone with the skateboarders, like expecting this plan to go down with the Kettlemans, and instead they're chasing some Spanish lady to her house. Jimmy shows up, the door opens, and a gun is put to Jimmy's face by Tuco, that we know is this crazy drug dealer from Breaking Bad.
Exactly.
Now, this is one little bit of value that if you didn't see Breaking Bad, you might miss in Better Call Saul. If you don't know who Tuco is, you don't realize the danger that is suddenly appeared. But I think it goes the other way. If you were to watch Better Call Saul first and in Breaking Bad, you will probably get similar, like sudden whoa moments because of things you know from the past there.
Right.
It works both ways. But anyway, this is what pulls Jimmy into the drug cartel.
Yes.
Relationship is this moment with Tuco. Tuco ends up taking these kids out to the desert. He wants to kill them. Jimmy convinces him just break the legs. Nacho shows up to kind of cool Tuco down, and this is how Nacho gets introduced. We're into like past the first episode by this, but that's how Nacho gets introduced. He's sort of like Tuco's right-hand man, and Tuco, he's part of the Salamanca family, and maybe he's bold and strong or whatever, but he's also weird and crazy and just causes trouble, and Nacho tries to keep things under control. And Mike is drawn into all this because he is just trying to set up a new life in Albuquerque, where most of this story takes place.
Where his family
He's
is.
trying to get away from, excuse me, the corruption of his hometown where his son was killed and everything.
Yes.
And he just works the gate at the courthouse. So he ends up interacting with Jimmy and everything. They evolve a relationship between them. Jimmy enlists his help when he starts to investigate the Kettlemans. It gets into a whole thing with that. But let's see. So that's basically how we get into the scenario with Howard, Chuck, Nacho, Mike, Jimmy. Kim works for Howard and used to work with Jimmy before he was a lawyer. They worked in the mailroom for Howard's law firm together.
Yes.
And Jim and Kimmy are forming a quasi romantic relationship through the course of the thing. I mean, eventually it becomes a solid romantic relationship, but it's on the edge at first.
Yeah.
Through the course of it, eventually Jimmy gets his breakthrough case is with a retirement home that has been scamming the residents for money. He pieces this together. He's got a big lawsuit on his hands. He gets other bigger law firms like Hamlin and McGill involved. Kim is involved with this. There's a lot of money to be made by all of them. It kind of gets put on the back burner for other things. In the meantime, Kim has got another case that she's working with a bank, Mesa Verda. There's she she's gonna lose it as it being like her thing
Yeah.
to the bigger company, and Jimmy goes behind the scenes and doctors some documents to make Chuck look like he's messed things up. Chuck knows he didn't mess things up, suspects that Jimmy is behind all this. He just can't prove it. It ends up going to, it's not exactly a court case, but there's a challenge. Chuck records Jimmy quasi confessing. It goes to not so much a court, but like a panel to figure out if Jimmy's going to lose his law license over this.
Right, because it's
Jimmy, in the course of this, kind of embarrasses and discredits Chuck. I don't know how much I should spoil this because a really big moment happens. If you're worried and you're watching this, I'm gonna just
yeah. I think we are like we're going to be spoiling prior seasons because if you watch season 6 somehow without watching, there's certain things that you're like, well, where's this character you guys have been talking about? So anyway,
so Chuck ends up killing himself. Jimmy just tears him apart. Chuck is trying to tear Jimmy apart, to be fair, and Jimmy, trying to protect himself, ends up tearing Chuck apart, and Chuck kills himself.
Yeah. And
Jimmy just does not quite know how to deal with this. A little scene, a little moment that I was reminded of rewatching some old episodes. Because, and I will say, there's a lot of people, there's this sentiment out there, people that say F Chuck. And I kind of understand it. Like sometimes Jimmy does a lot of crappy, mean, irresponsible, illegal, bad stuff. Chuck is generally presented like this good moral character.
Exactly.
But we kind of know he's not, especially in relation to Jimmy. I don't know if you remember.
He treats him like shit.
Yes, he treats him really bad. And in fact, worse than Jimmy even knows. Do you remember there was a scene when it was a flashback scene when Jimmy and Chuck are at the hospital and we realize that their mom is laying on her deathbed.
Yes.
And they're kind of chatting and bantering and trying to like reminisce on old times. And although Chuck keeps on like every time Jimmy tries to think of an old time, Chuck points out some flaw in Jimmy. And eventually Jimmy's like, look, I'm going to get something to eat. In the time that Jimmy goes and comes back, the mom dies. She kind of comes to, the machine's beak. And Chuck is like, Mom, are you okay? She's like, Jimmy. And he's like, no, it's Chuck. It's me. It's Chuck. And she's like, where's Jimmy? And then dies. Then Jimmy comes back and Chuck's like, she died. Jimmy's like, oh no. And they're sitting there and they're disturbed and they're depressed. And Jimmy's like, man, did she come to? Did she say anything? Did she have any last words? And Chuck says, nope. Just lies to him. Yeah. And it was like the opening, the cold open, and it cuts to the intro music and goes on. But just a reminder of how bad Chuck was to Jimmy. Anyway, that doesn't make us happy when Chuck decides to kill himself.
Yeah.
One thing about the show is it's tough to watch these characters who are kind of odds at each other, who none of them are just straight evil. They all have their virtues and their flaws, and we're kind of disappointed that they can't get it right, that they can't make amends or be honest with each other or forgive each other or whatever it is. But anyway, that's one. I'm going to put a pin in that for a second and come back to it. In the meantime, what we see on the cartel side is that Hector, Nacho's, the cartel boss, Nacho is under.
Before we get into that, I want to point out, the guy who plays Hector is fantastic. And, Hector is introduced in Breaking Bad. This character. And one of the things that they do with, it's not Hector, but like they do this with a couple of characters, is they give them such a unique flaw, I guess we'll call it. Chuck, he had this ridiculous, it felt like, issue with electricity. And if you like had put that on paper and like showed it to somebody, you would think this is ridiculous, this idea, just in general. But they execute it so well. With Hector, he's just a guy in a wheelchair and he hits this little bell, and that's how he talks. And you would think that's ridiculous. But the actor pulls it off flawlessly. They write it so well. I can't give enough. I hate Hector, but I hate him for the good reasons, you know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, they make him a despicable character. And we know from Breaking Bad, there's some background. We know that years ago, we got a in Breaking Bad, we got a flashback that was even farther back than Better Call Saul, that Hector killed Gus's lover. Hector is part of the cartel family. He's like literally a bloodline family member. So he
yes.
has this sort of acceptance, even if he's bad or crazy or trouble or
Hmm.
whatever else. He also has a certain loyalty, it may be a certain tenacity. I don't want to say he's like without virtue, but I think his negatives by far
Yeah.
outweigh his
I feel like
positives.
he's like
By
prideful of
far,
his
far, far.
family. Like that's one of his
Yeah.
like key things. He's very prideful of his
Yeah.
the family and like everyone in the family, and he wants to make sure they're all taken care of. And if they're not, he'll kill them.
Yeah.
Type of thing. I don't know, you know.
But Gus is, through his tenacity and perseverance and cleverness, is working his way up the drug cartel. But he's just not part of that Mexican mafia family. So
Hmm.
he can never really totally be in. But he's making so much money, he's sort of being accepted,
Yeah.
which makes Hector jealous. And Hector kills Gus's lover, embarrasses Gus. Gus is sort of in a position where he can't do much about it. He like Hector's just this made man in this drug cartel. He can't really do anything.
I forget
But
yeah,
Hector's
Gus is gay, right?
yeah.
I always forget about that actually, because he just doesn't. Well, for one, he doesn't
And
come off
yeah.
like that, you know. And he again, Gus is hard to read. Like it feels like a lot of time that he doesn't have any. No, I don't say care, but like he's just very cold. It's hard to understand
Yeah.
what he's thinking and all that. But anyways, that's actually really important. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah, he has this long-term goal of revenge. That's what motivates Gus. Not money, not success in the drugs. Like he gets money and he has success because he's very cautious and attention to detail, and he
Hmm.
plans ahead and so on and so on. But what's really motivating him is this long-term quest for quest for revenge against Hector.
Yeah.
Now, Hector is starting to pressure Nacho to use Nacho's father to smuggle drugs. Nacho's father works in like a car shop, and he wants to use Nacho's dad's car shop to like move drugs around. And Nacho does not want this.
Mm-hmm.
Nacho doesn't like the position he gets put in by Hector in the first place, as far as like being violent. And he's kind of been sucked into this drug world, probably through mistakes he made to get to
Yeah.
this point in the first place, but he's kind of there now. He doesn't really like it. He doesn't know how to get out of it. And now his father's going to get sucked into it. And he decides he needs to take out Hector.
Mm-hmm.
And what he does is he switches out. Hector has like this heart medication. Nacho switches it out.
Yeah. X
But it
Factory.
doesn't
Yes.
quite.
Sorry.
What's that?
X Factory just showed up and said, like, "Hi, how's life?" It's great. We're talking about Better Call Saul. We're diving into the past before we hit the final season. So we haven't even talked about the final season. There's lots of spoilers if you haven't seen it. We kind of went on a tangent about in general spoilers. So I mean, what we're talking about is a lot of fun, and I mean, we love talking about movies in general, especially great ones like Better Call Saul. But anyways, just want to let you know.
Yeah, I feel whenever as a new viewer, I want to point out, this show is amazing. I, on one hand, don't want to spoil it for you, but hopefully us talking about it might inspire you to watch it if you haven't. I think the show is so good, even if you know certain plot points, it still won't be spoiled. It'll still be great performances and great, set design and direction and everything else. But we are definitely spoiling key plot points. So if you are worried about that, you might want to tune out. And anyway, it doesn't quite work, and heck, I'm not even gonna say what I just said before to maybe avoid the spoiler. But just to fill in what Eric was saying, is that it doesn't quite work. Hector ends up in a wheelchair. Nacho effectively takes over this part of the drug operation
Yep.
now that Hector's kind of out of the picture. Tuco has gotten himself arrested, so he's kind of out of the picture. Then we get a new character, Lalo, is brought in to sort of oversee things. Even if Nacho's doing well, he's kind of an unknown to the higher ups in the drug cartel,
Yeah.
whereas Lalo is another like top dog.
And
we
he has a
see
Salamanca also. He has a Salamanca name. So
Lalo Salamanca, and we see that he is clearly competent. He's charming, athletic, intelligent, clever, patient, he's got it all going on, and you feel better about your heroes when the villains are formidable. You know what
Yep.
I mean? And I think you
Yes.
get that out of Lalo and Gus and some of these characters. So next, wrinkle in things that I pointed out earlier is that then Gus starts using Nacho's dad against him to get information about what the Salamancas are doing. So I'm gonna go back to where I put a pin in what happened with Chuck
Mhm.
and the fallout from that. Jimmy just doesn't know how to deal with the grief properly. I believe my analysis is that Jimmy is blaming, at least partly,
Yeah.
rightly so, is blaming himself.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mistakes that Jimmy and Kim have made in the past. Uh, kind of Howard was their boss, and Howard's trying to be an organized, successful head of a big law firm,
Hmm.
and some kind of shaky things that Jimmy and Kim had done got them on the outs with Howard. But Howard does eventually try to explain himself and apologize for mistakes and make amends. And Chuck was close to Howard also. They built that law firm up together. They were
Yes.
close friends. And so, Howard is also taken aback and having a hard time dealing with this. And my analysis is that Jimmy is just taking his anger at himself, his inability to deal with the guilt,
Mhm.
and he's displacing it all onto Howard.
That makes sense.
He,
Yeah.
and he just has it out for Howard, and the more that Howard tries to be nice to him or tries to make amends for things or tries to move past it himself, the more that makes Jimmy mad. Kim, being in love with Jimmy, just stays on his side. If Jimmy's mad at Howard, so am I. That's how
Yep.
Kim goes about it.
Yes. I want to
Okay, go ahead.
point. So one of the reasons I feel so bad for Howard is, you pointed out he was partners with, you could argue it was his best friend, Chuck. And Chuck died and he committed suicide, and he couldn't even help him, or I don't know, the psychological part of that must be really hard on Howard, and in ways I feel like he's presented as a villain even though we know he's not. And like you said, Jimmy is just taking it out on him, and I just it kind of goes back to for one, great writing. He I just feel really bad for Chuck because he's just in a really bad situation, and I could put myself in it, you're trying to do the right thing, you're trying to be the good person and the good guy, and support even someone who Chuck still loved, Jimmy. I don't know. I just think they do a fantastic job with how they present Howard, and I just can't help but feel really bad for that character a lot of times.
Let me take this moment to talk about color.
Okay, yeah, go for it.
Can I do that? Do you have the ability to bring up those images?
Now I think about it, maybe not.
Beforehand, huh?
Yeah, I forgot to make a slight thing about that. So yeah, but there's a picture right behind you. I mean that's just a small little thing, but
yeah.
Um,
let me see. I wonder if I.
But I at least pull it up. We could talk about what you at least gave to me. So there's one picture. So in general, a lot of the characters are themed on color. Like a lot of characters will either wear a certain color that describes the idea that they want to have about certain pretty much themes. So for example, blue. Well, what do they describe blue? John, what does blue represent?
Okay, so blue is sort of a swirl of good. It's legal, moral, positive protagonist.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, when you see blue on screen, it's gonna be a good guy. It's someone, or a good person, I should say, someone trying to do the right thing, or at least the legal thing, or even the relatively right thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, red is negative, bad, immoral, evil, illegal. When someone shows up in red, it's a bad guy or someone doing a bad thing, or at least an illegal thing.
Yes.
Okay. Those are the central colors, but I'm going to touch on a couple others
Hmm.
too. Yellow is uncertainty or transition. Green is cover, protection, hidden. You can see how those are connected.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
somewhere a swirl in that realm, okay? So blue and red, I think, are the most obvious and clear. You see them constantly throughout the show. And the best examples of blue are Kim and Howard. They're always in blue. They have blue suits and blue ties and blue
Hmm.
cars, and their blue light is cast on them. They have blue furniture. Like they're just always blue. They're the well, for the most part, it's shifting with Kim, but they're the most consistently good, legal, protagonistic characters. It's ironic to me that there's a lot of people that have a sort of this hate for Howard. The times when like there was a time when Kimmy messed up a case and Howard put her in like doc review. She's just doing like tedious work in a basement, and a lot of people like are mad at Howard for that. And maybe I understand that, but Kim did kind of mess up,
Hmm.
and like I said, he's trying to manage his law firm, and it wasn't like he fired her. Usually, it's work that needs to be done. Maybe
Yeah.
it's like a little beneath her level or whatever, but um, he didn't like ruin her career or
No.
call her mean names or fire, like it. And it's so not only do I feel like some of the hate that people have for Howard is really just that they love Jimmy and
Hmm.
Jimmy's pitted against Howard, so they want to
Exactly.
be against Howard. And maybe there's a little bit of like rich white man, you just want to be angry at the rich white man.
Hmm.
Um,
Like.
but if you think about it,
Hmm.
Howard has constantly been honest,
Hmm.
hardworking. He's trying to make amends for mistakes that he's made. He's been
Exactly.
polite, and he's always in blue. I think that's the clue. That's the writers of the show were telling us he's a good guy. We should be rooting for him. People doing things bad against him are bad guys.
Wait, what's Chuck in? Obviously I didn't, especially when I was like watching, because I binge watched like all the episodes about a year or two ago, because I went from Breaking Bad to Better Call Saul. But I feel like he was in Grays. Am I right on that? Okay.
Sometimes some characters are more subdued in their colors. They're like in neutrals and grays, beige or maybe dark greens, colors that sometimes without the right light, it's hard to even tell what color it
Hmm.
is. And I think that's partly either some combination of they're trying to hide from us the nature of that character or the actions of that moment or whatever, or that the character is kind of neutral. They're not clearly good or bad, which Chuck it kind of fits in that.
Yeah.
I noticed that sometimes Chuck would have green on, and I was into well, let me I said green. My interpretation of that was green was protection. That's
Yeah.
Chuck is like in his house with all the power off, so he's like safe from the electricity, for example.
Which is kind of funny. Electricity. I don't know if this has any connection or not, but like when I think of electricity or energy, especially like in video games, it's yellow. And he's afraid of yellow. I have no clue if that actually has anything, but it's just kind of I mean, he's a lawyer who's trying to fight crime. And look, the one thing, like he's like afraid of the bad almost. I have no clue if that's.
I see what you're saying, but I don't think that was. I
don't know if it's intentional or not.
Intent of the writers, or they would have done more stuff with that.
It just popped in my head, but anyway, sorry.
Yeah. Okay, so red, by the way, you see most prominently with the cartel. Nacho first shows up wearing red, as does Hector and Lalo. Tuco has a red car. Tuco was wearing a red shirt when Saul showed up at the house and he pulled the gun on him. In fact, skateboarders who were trying to run the scam on Saul, redheads, red chin strap on their helmets, red skateboard, like they were cast in red. The Kettleman wife, when she first showed up, she had a red purse and a red bracelet.
Oh my god!
If you remember, eventually they disappear, and Saul just knows that they took off.
Yeah.
And he's trying to find them. Like the police think they were kidnapped, but they kind of staged it that way. And Saul knows he can't say anything because he was in cahoots to get the money with Mike and all. But so he just can't say certain things, but he knows. And he just goes wandering off into the woods behind her house. And sure enough, he finds them in a tent, a red tent, like over and over again. You will always see people mixed up in illegal or immoral activity, they're going to be wearing. Sometimes it'll be a matter of degree. Sometimes they might have like a pink shirt or an orange shirt, not just straight bright red,
Mhm.
and it might show the degree of how bad what they're doing is.
Interesting.
Saul, in fact, a lot of times will have like a blue jacket and a red tie. He's kind of torn. He's kind
Yes.
of in the middle. A lot of
Yes.
times he'll have like a yellow shirt and a blue jacket, or he mixes the colors a lot because he's kind of going bouncing around.
Colorful
Think
character.
about Saul's car, a yellow car with one red door. That's what Saul's driving around, right? He's in this uncertain transition time period, trying to be a lawyer, but he still has one foot in the scam side.
Mhm.
He says that one red door. And think about eventually, he gets the good job with the big law firm.
Yep.
Remember that section?
Yeah.
And they give him a company car. He gets a car as part of the job, a blue car. Remember that Kim gave him that thermos, that coffee thermos that
Yes.
was yellow with red writing that said "World's second best lawyer."
Huh.
She's the best, and he's the second best. And it was like this prized possession that he had gotten from the
Actually, I
love
think
of
it was
his life.
yellow, but
It was yellow with red writing.
oh yeah,
Did I
yeah, yeah.
say
Sorry,
backwards?
yeah.
When he gets the company car, the blue company car, and he takes his yellow and red thermos, it won't fit in the cup holder. I mean, that I'm telling you, that was not just a random coincidence. They
No.
put that scene in there for a reason.
And by the
It's
way,
best demonstration of the meaning of color on the show.
And like that scene in general, that would go over your head because how they present it felt so realistic. He's having trouble putting a damn cup in his car. Everyone does that, and I don't know. Like that went over my head, and you pointed that out.
Meaning behind
exactly.
It. Yeah.
Love when writing's like that, which obviously has that throughout the whole show. But
Eric, is there a way I can share my screen? Is there a way I can show what's on my screen?
I don't think so. Hey, give me one sec.
Share my screen. I'm gonna click this button.
Yeah.
You tell me if you can suddenly see.
Yeah, go for it. Nothing. Hey, give me one sec. I'm gonna put it on. Let me figure out images. New.
Sorry, anyone watching this. So we'll get it together in a second. Man,
I could probably do it, but I'm gonna need to do one thing really fast. I'm just gonna take a quick moment. I made an image section. I'm going to put my screen on.
Wait. Is it doing it now, Eric?
No, it's not.
Or Flint? Sorry.
Give me one sec. I'm gonna. No, wrong thing. Hi.
Is there anyone in the audience? Is there anyone out there that could maybe see it? Maybe you can't, but everyone else could.
No, they can see what I can see. Well, because I'm looking at the thing. I'm gonna hide my screen really fast, and then I can pull up an image.
Still no? Ooh, did it do it now?
Probably.
I see like a third screen.
Oh, I would have to click on that probably. But I got it. Okay. So we have Kim with a toothbrush. Which shot do you want to see?
I want to look at the scene that with Nacho on the right and Mike on the left with, I think his name was Daniel in the middle. I think it was Colin Robinson because he's in another show, but
Okay, I got it on the screen.
Okay, so if people watching can see that character in the middle, if you remember, he was someone that the cartel was using. He like worked for a farm. He's like this nerdy character who works for a pharmacy, and a cartel was using him to get like pills or supplies to make drugs with. Do you remember that character?
Yes.
And eventually he's getting a bunch of money, and he buys, if I remember right, a yellow, maybe it was an orange or red, like a warm color Humvee, and he's got orange shoes, kind of showing he's going to this unlawful side. He's getting in deeper than he realizes. He doesn't know what he's getting mixed up into, and I think the yellow shirt represents that. He's in this moment of uncertainty and transition, and here comes Nacho in a red shirt coming after him. Eventually they realize he has like a baseball card collection, and Saul gets him out of trouble in the law. Anyway, but you see the colors being used here. Mike, it's hard to tell, kind of like you point out with Chuck, sometimes the colors that Mike wears are kind of subdued, but I think that's a dark green jacket. Mike is trying to protect Daniel from Nacho, who's being a bad guy.
Yes.
All right. Bring up the image with Nacho, Lalo, and Saul.
All right.
Can.
You said install. Yeah. Got it.
Pause this preview to save your resources.
So you have a red car in the background. This one, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so here, this was when I don't remember for sure if this is the first time we saw Lalo, but this is the first time Saul and Lalo meet. This is Nacho picks Saul up off the street. Saul's walking down the street eating a green ice cream cone, okay? And Nacho, which represents protected, safe, okay? He's like in his world of being a lawyer. And then here comes Nacho, rolls up in a car on the street next to him, says, "Get in." And then Saul's like, and he kind of, Nacho like reveals a gun. You don't have a choice here. Get in. He starts to get in, and Nacho doesn't want to bring the ice cream cone. Saul like drops the ice cream cone on the ground. I probably should get a picture of this too. And the ice cream cone, the green ice cream, gets swarmed with red ants. And that's just perfectly symbolic of what's happening here. Nacho brings Saul to see Lalo. And Nacho, you'll see here, is not actually wearing a red shirt. Because in this moment, Nacho's not actually being a bad guy. Nacho, at this point in the show, he's just trying to figure out how to get his dad out of all this.
Yeah.
Nacho is the vehicle, a red vehicle that you see in the screen that's bringing Saul to Lalo. Saul at this point is the protagonist. He's wearing blue. You can see he's got a blue shirt on. He's just being a lawyer here. Lalo is wearing a pink shirt. In this moment, he's not exactly doing something illegal, but he's setting up illegal plans. He wants Saul to get one of his drug guys out of jail. He wants to set up this whole thing. So once again, this is just an example of how the colors are perfectly representing what's going on.
Yes.
Let's go to the one with Chuck and Jimmy in jail.
Yeah.
I just did something on my screen. I don't know if you can see when I'm if I'm sharing stuff or not. Hopefully this works out eventually. Someone can tell us. But anyway, in this scene, we see this is the scene when Chuck when Chuck was basically there to bail Jimmy out, and Jimmy was definitely in the wrong. There was no gray area. There was no like end justifies the means. He was just being a bad person. He just like pooped on someone's car or something. You know, he was like being accused of like some sort of sexual harassment crime. Like I've slightly forgotten some of the details, but this is when Jimmy had definitely committed a crime with no good intentions or ulterior motives to help someone or any. It was just bad wrongdoing.
Yeah.
And it's completely illegal. And he's wearing red. There's no yellow mixed in. There's not like a yellow light on him. There's no blue in the background. There's no gray. He's just in red because he's just a bad guy.
Right.
Chuck comes to bail him out of jail. Chuck's coming to use his prowess as a successful attorney to help out his screw-up brother. So then, let's see. Can we have the one? All right. If you just think for a second, go ahead and if you can bring up the one with Kim and the toothbrush.
Okay.
I brought this up because if you look at just Google Kim Wexler. Every freaking image you find of, you might find Rhea Seehorn, the actress. You might find some pictures of her as an actress, not in blue. But every scene in the show until this past season, she's always in blue. Her cat, remember she broke her arm in a car wreck? Her cast was blue, right? Like she's always in blue. Everything around her is in blue. They're clearly painting her to be a good guy. Even I got this particular picture because even her toothbrush is blue. Like
I thought that's just funny.
Not only is it driving home the point that she's a good guy, but also I want to drive home the point of how much attention the showmakers pay. Like they easily could have just been a green or orange or purple or anything toothbrush, but they decided to make it a blue. There's no way that's just an accident or a coincidence, especially when you consider how consistently she is otherwise put in blue. So now, if you will, Eric,
there's another picture of her with a jacket and she has red on.
Yes, go to that one. That's from this most current season.
Have you ever seen this?
You see that not only is she not wearing blue, but we see these warm colors. She's not straight up wearing red, but there's pink and orange, and the whole suit looks a little bit more maybe brown or maroon. And this is another piece of this is in the past, not only is she always in blue, but it's in plain, straight, basic blue. But this pattern is a little more complicated on her shirt. It's not
Yes.
basic or plain or clear. It's a swirl of a pattern of several different shapes or directions and colors going on, right? So again, I think this is a clear. I think this might have been in one of the clips, if not this exact image, but like this,
Yeah.
an image of her in this attire was a clue to me that a shift in Kim's direction was coming. Let me think.
There's one more. There's the Howard
I think
and
there's
that
the one.
the Howard and Saul
Yeah,
when they're
or
fighting,
Howard.
which
Yeah,
we're gonna get into this a little later because it's obviously in the season. But
yeah.
because I
We
remember
could talk about it more, but you could just see here. Howard is in blue.
Mhm.
It's gonna work.
Yep, and
Howard is in blue. Saul is in red. When he first walked into the whole, if you watch it the whole time, they make a point of see how the posts of the corner of the ring is red.
His
other
ring.
corner was blue, and they kept Howard on the blue side, Jimmy on the red side. I'm gonna can I? I'm gonna see if I can figure out how to stop sharing my screen now. Screen. Not stop stream.
Oh no! Disappeared.
Are you still there?
I am, but your screen is not.
Video. Am I back? Okay, I'm back.
There you are.
You see me now? Okay.
Yes.
Well, I don't know how to stop sharing that.
That's fine. It's not on the screen right now, so
I am sharing it, but maybe make this bigger again. Okay, so I want to throw out another example just to drive home how consistently and how well and how meaningfully they do this. You remember there was a scene where Nacho was trying to get in an attempt to get his dad out of this mess. He knew that Nacho saw his dad was getting drawn into. He tries to buy his dad out, tries to buy his dad's garage from him.
Mhm.
But he knows his dad's not going to let him do this, right? So he does it through a friend. He gives a friend money, which he has plenty of from all the drug trade.
Yeah.
Has his friend offer the money to his dad to buy out the garage. His dad sees through it, though, and he comes to visit Nacho.
Yeah.
And so Nacho kind of like straightens up the house a little bit. He's got like these girls over. He comes in. They kind of small talk introductions. They sit down at the table, and so the camera has to cut back and forth between Nacho and his dad. And when a camera is on Nacho's dad, behind him, directly behind him, is a big blue poster. So whenever we're looking at Nacho's dad, he's covered. He's shrouded in blue from behind him.
Yeah.
Then when it cuts the other direction to Nacho, should have got pictures of this, but behind Nacho in the background is a red painting, like in the room and the next. So it's a little bit of red looming over. Nacho's not wearing red because he's trying to be a good guy, but the bad guy, the bad element, is looming over him. And I'm telling you, man, if anyone out there is watching this and you're watching a show, rewatch any episode or in the next episode or next week.
Yeah.
You won't be able to stop seeing it. You won't be able. It'll be this whole new level of entertainment and insight that you're getting into the show once you realize how consistently they're using the colors. And I go off about this so much because it's how I know Howard is a good guy. Howard is being done wrong. That Jimmy and Kim going against him is making them be bad guys. And you can see that as Kim starts shifting to wearing more red colors. One more example. I knew it when Jimmy first went to Sandpiper and the receptionist was wearing a red blouse. I was like, scamming money from the old people. Like, I knew it right away. It's like a spoiler. I knew it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like showing, or foreshadowing stuff without people even realizing it unless they realize it. No, it's fantastic. So,
and we can see it continuing in this episode, like I pointed out with Jimmy and Chuck boxing. We saw it with the blue rose for Nacho.
Yeah, I want to talk about like things to come, but we can't even talk about that until we obviously get into episode 1 and on. Because what, they're 4 episodes in or 5 episodes, and I can't remember. I feel like it's 5 episodes in, at this moment, but.
was all a bit of a tangent that I
Yeah.
thought was important to take. It's
Yes,
super
it absolutely
valuable
is.
in general to be aware of all that, and it adds a lot to my analysis. And I think maybe your analysis, not just Flint or everyone out there watching. I think knowing how they use these colors is gonna make you think about things in a new way.
Mhm.
But just trying to recap up to where we were in the past, we have Jimmy taking his frustrations out on Howard. Kim siding with Jimmy, whatever he does. Jimmy sided with Kim, whatever she does.
Mhm.
Um, Nacho having attempted to take out Hector and failed, and now under the thumb of Gus, um, because he's threatening Nacho's dad. We have uh, Mike getting more and more tied into Gus's world.
Mhm.
There's a point where Mike, it's a little bit of a tangent to the central storyline, but he gets beaten up really bad. He basically is sort of a death wish. He's pretty much like just giving up on life. He's only trying to make his way through the world for the sake of his granddaughter,
Yeah.
and and he ends up getting beaten up really bad. Gus saves him. Incidentally, Gus also saved Hector when Nacho tried to kill him. Gus saved Hector because
Mhm.
Gus wants to be the one to kill Hector. Um,
Mhm.
uh, and they and so Gus feels committed. I mean, sorry, Mike now feels committed to Gus. He has some sort of respect for
Mhm.
Gus's quest for revenge, um, and he's already kind of like on the dark side, and he just keeps getting deeper. Mike, like several of the characters we watch, we see that Mike is very proficient and intelligent
Yeah.
and dedicated in attention to detail. Like he's peas in a pod with Gus, and so they've gotten close together. Um, so I'm trying to think. Most recently, what has happened is that Lalo is on to Gus,
Yeah.
and Mike is kind of tracking tracking Lalo. Lalo is on to the meth lab that Gus is trying to build, that we know
Mhm.
eventually does get built. It's kind of key to know that in the future. I guess maybe spoilery if someone is watching just Better Call Saul, not Breaking Bad, but we
It's
do
obvious,
know that the
yes.
lab does get built. But it's on a pause right now because one of the engineers, Gus had hired these German engineers to build it, and one of them broke away. They're supposed to like stay at the compound. He's trying to keep it all secret, but this guy went and he like contacted his wife and he's trying to set up a meeting, and it's just letting information out. And Gus tells Mike, "You got to go kill this Werner guy. Like he's like a witness to stuff that's going on, and we can't
Mhm.
have this." Mike does kill him. It was kind of a dark, sad moment.
Yeah.
Um,
These are like one
and
of those like relatable things. Like also like Mike wasn't being evil. The guy who ran away wasn't running away because he was like afraid of finishing the project or the cartel or anything. He just wanted to see his wife.
yeah,
Like he was like away from his wife. Now he probably didn't realize how deep he was getting into, but he actually thought he was going to be fine too. It kind of was a heartbreaking moment. I remember when Mike had to put the guy down.
yeah, it was terribly heartbreaking. Um, so, um, in the meantime, Nacho has ingratiated himself with Lalo. There's some details, but like Nacho does like some heroic stuff. He proves himself to Lalo, which he's mostly doing so that he can keep the trust of the Salamancas while he's actually spying on them to tell Gus.
Mm-hmm.
Gus sets up a hit on Lalo at his home
Mm-hmm.
through Nacho. The, the hit doesn't quite work out. We know that not that Gus's mercenary team busts in there and kills almost everyone. Nacho escapes, but so does Lalo. And in the first episode, we see that Lalo sort of had an escape plan. He was ready for this type of thing, which we see a lot of these characters,
Yeah.
Gus and uh, Lalo, like kind of have. They're kind of thinking ahead, like if things really go down, like what their plan is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so Lalo is able to cover up the fact and make it look like he's dead. But he contacts Hector. He wants to get revenge, but Hector dings him, proof. Get
Yeah.
proof first. Don't
Mm-hmm.
just go after him. And Bolsa, who is another character that's on tier. He's like a step down from Don Eladio.
Mhm.
Uh, he's sort of like Don Eladio's right hand man, and his biggest motivation here is just keep peace.
Yeah.
He knows that Gus and Salamancas have this beef with each other, and if they go to war, it's going to be bad for everyone.
Yeah, like
It's
bad for business,
We're going to
basically.
die. It's going to draw the attention of the police. It's going to disrupt their drug trade, and in the bottom line, money. And so
Yeah.
Bolsa just wants to keep the peace. They need so I'm starting to get into this season now. Let me back up. Let me think where things are at with Kim and Jimmy. Kim and Jimmy at the end of last season. Everything I said on the cartel side was like culminating the end of last season, leading into
Yeah.
this one. On the Kim and Jimmy side, the way things are culminating is one, Lalo shows up at their house, like a very tense moment. Saul had been sent out into the desert to pick up money to pay for Lalo's bail. Lalo ends up, skipping bail. When Saul is picking up the money, like this other gang attacks him. Mike saves him. He barely lives through this whole ordeal. Lalo figures out there's more going on than what Saul is telling him. He comes to question him.
Mhm.
Kimmy's now mixed up in it all.
Mhm.
It's starting to tie these two worlds together. They think that Lalo gets killed. They get word from Mike about this hit, and they think that Lalo's been killed. And so what they want to do is move on with their lives,
Yeah.
if you will. Jimmy wants to set up his own firm. He's trying to move out from his brother's name and be his own person. Kim wants to do pro bono work, and she's tired of working for these banks where these rich old white men just
Mhm.
maneuver around to get more money. She's trying to help like the average person. And they have this idea that the Sandpiper case that Jimmy had that is going to eventually make him a bunch of money because he'll get a cut of the money that
Mhm.
Sandpiper was a retirement home that was scamming the residents out of money.
Yeah.
Jimmy figured it out. And there's going to be a settlement where they all get a bunch of money from Sandpiper, and as a lawyer, Jimmy's going to get a cut. But it's kind of held up at the moment, and it's being managed by Howard and other lawyers. And so Jimmy, and Kim start thinking of ways to ruin Howard's reputation.
Mhm.
One, because they're just kind of psychologically mixed up and feel like they need to get revenge on him. And two, because if they do, they believe it will cause a Sandpiper case to settle immediately and they'll get a big payout, like $1 million or something. Like they'll
Oh
get a
wow.
big hunk of money.
I didn't even
Um,
think I forgot
it
about
might
that.
have been
Yeah.
more than that. I can't remember exactly,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Yeah.
like
It's a
they
lot.
were like talking about it in bed, and she's like, "How much of that do you get?" And he's like, "I don't know, like 17% or whatever." And she's like, "So that's like da da." They're like doing math. He's like 1.8 million, or a hunk of money, which means that she can afford to quit the big law firm and do
Mhm.
this pro bono work for poor people. Jimmy can start up his own law firm on his own. They kind of rationalize it that if the Sandpiper case is drawn out longer, the old residents will get more money, but they're already old. They don't have that much longer to spend the money anyway, so they're thinking that we should say they'll be better off getting a little bit less money sooner, and we'll
Yes.
get this money now. And Howard's rich anyway. Even if we mess up his reputation, he'll be okay. He deserves it for what he did to us, that smug jerk. Like they're
Mhm.
finding all these ways in their mind of rationalizing it. And at first it seems like Jimmy's just like, yeah, wouldn't it be funny if? But then Kim's like, yeah, I
Yeah.
think this is the plan and this is how we can do it. And Jimmy's like, whoa, you're really doing this? Okay. And a lot of times in the past, Jimmy's had these kind of cockamamie scams, like these
Mhm.
ways to get some guy to bar to buy them drinks, or some way to manipulate the law to get Chuck in trouble or something like that.
Yeah.
And Kim's gone along with it. She started off, I don't want to know about this, like whatever you do, Jimmy, I love you, I'll stick with you, but I can't know about this illegal activity.
Mhm.
Now the gears have switched, and she's like, hey, help me out with this legal activity,
Right.
Uh, so that's where we're at going into this new season.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
No,
like
there's definitely a
an
lot
hour and a half of
pre-exposition to the new stuff. So, do we want to stop here and then like next week go into actually the episode, or do we want to talk a little bit? Let's go over at least the intro. We should go over at least the intro.
You want to go over the intro to the season, or
Yeah,
the
yeah,
intro
yeah.
to the
The intro to the season. Like the
Okay.
very first shots, which is one of my favorite shots or segments. I don't know. They did a really awesome job. That is honestly the Thai montage, which I freaking love. Um, but what's that represent? The symbolism behind it, the thing at the very end of that shot. Um, well, we can go over that, and then after that, we will pick up next week with the first episode, and maybe even dive into to episode 2, depending on where we stand.
Kind of the nature of this show is everything's pretty intertwined, so it'll
Yes.
be hard to talk about one episode without talking about another one, or
Yeah.
even another season or another series.
Yeah. Because our goal is to catch up. They're gonna have like I want to say a month-ish. After they show, I think it's the last episode, the 6th episode, is coming up this week. They're gonna have a month break, and then they'll start back up, and we hopefully will catch up, so we can start talking about what's to come. Because I would like to talk about potential spoilers, like where you think things are going, and we can't talk about that right now until we at least catch up a little bit on what's going on in the season. So, anyways, let's talk about the very first shot, or the opening scene of season 6. So the opening scene is they show a shot of a whole pack of. This is going back to the color stuff, but black and white ties are falling into what looks like a bend, and it goes from black and white, like the very first tie. Give me one sec. Is a striped tie and a polka dot tie. And then
they're just black and white, right?
Just black and white. And then it goes into, I want to say there's like 2 more that are very similar, but they're black and white. And then the very first color we see is a flower tie, and it has a little bit of hint of pink. And it goes from pink to a blue tie, and then blue and orange, pink and blue, red and yellow, red and blue. So basically, I don't even know if there's like any relation to. It's interesting that you say, red and blue are like almost the main colors, you could say, and they end with that, with the ties. But the shot is very well filmed in the first place. Like, I assume they used real ties. It doesn't look CG. I don't know how freaking hard this would be. That's part of why I think it's like an incredible shot, because like I had to even think about how they even did this, on top of like what that even means. Like, obviously that means a lot. What's your take on this very first shot?
So I was particularly surprised, excited by this scene, because if you remember, another thing we should point out is that one aspect of this show is that the first episode of each season starts off with a black and white scene.
Yes, we
flash forward to Gene. Gene is Saul's future persona. We know from Breaking Bad that eventually Walter White's empire starts to fall apart all around him. And of course, Saul is tied up in all of this. And so they each go to this character. On the surface he's like a vacuum repair guy, but really what he does is hide people. He gets people a new identity, a new license, a new job, a new car, whatever it is, moves into another state, and they just like, it's sort of like the witness protection program, but not like through the government.
Yes.
And so they're hidden both from the government, the cops and lawyers and who all that might be coming after them, but also from the cartel and other people that they've wronged or who might be afraid would rat them out or whatever else. So we follow in Breaking Bad to see what goes on to happen to Walt, not Saul. He gets his suitcases, he pays this guy money, he gets on a van and goes off, and we don't know what happens. By the way, he does make an offhand comment to Walt at one point. It's like, hey, a year from now, I'm probably just gonna be, I don't know, running a Cinnabon somewhere. Like he's like, Walt is still trying to like get revenge and get his money and all this stuff. And Saul's like, it's over, man. You don't get it. Like I'll be happy, if I'm alive working at a mall a year from now. And so sure enough, they turn that into reality. Worth noting, it was a moment in Breaking Bad that also inspired the characters of Nacho and Lalo. That when we first get introduced to Saul, he I mentioned earlier, like Walt realizes, hey, we need a lawyer. Jesse brings him to
Yeah.
this criminal lawyer. At first, Saul doesn't want to work with him, so they kidnap him. They like put a hood over his head, drive him out to the desert, and like in the middle of the night in
Oh
front of a
yeah.
dug grave. They're wearing masks, and at first he's like in a panic. He thinks, he doesn't know what they're doing or why they're out there. They just want him to like keep this kid that got arrested from ratting them out. Like Saul was representing this kid, and his plan to get the kid out of trouble. It was like one of the drug dealers working for them. Saul's plan was to get him to rat out
Thank you, Love Bear.
the distributor. And so, but Walt's like, no, we don't want him to rat out the distributor. Saul doesn't want to play along with this, so they kidnap him. They took him to the desert. Walt gives himself away because he's got cancer and the chemo, and he's coughing. He had coughed when he first met Saul, and now he's coughing again in the desert with a mask on. Saul pieces it together, and they take the mask off, and they become partners, really. But before that moment, they're just in this fearful panic. Saul's trying to fast talk his way out, of a gun to his head in front of a grave in the middle of the desert by these kidnappers. He says, "Is this because of Nacho? Did Lalo send you?" That's not an exact quote, but he says something to that effect.
I never knew that.
That's all we ever knew or heard anything of. I think of those characters, but they, the makers of the show took that and spun it into this whole new series, these whole new characters. But that's
so
where it
awesome.
came from. Just a throwaway line about him working in a Cinnabon. Well, now we see, we go in the big picture. The story goes Better Call Saul, Breaking Bad, then Gene. And Gene, Gene is post Breaking Bad, but we're seeing snippets of Gene in the Better Call Saul story. Yeah. And they're always presented to us in black and white.
Yes.
Which, one, it gets to hide color clues from us. So, like, there's a few times when Saul's at the Cinnabon and someone suspicious looking comes there, and we see that Saul, much like Gus and Kim in the Better Call Saul storyline that we're watching, are very paranoid. Saul, or in this case, Gene, is super paranoid. Anytime he sees someone or something, anytime a cop comes around or someone looks at him weird, he always is afraid that it's someone that's tracked him down and he might be found out or whatever. But if it was in color and they had a blue shirt, we would know he's safe. Or a red shirt, we would know to be scared. But we never know because they hide the colors from us. And so I was fully expecting in the first scene of the first episode of this season to get a Gene sequence in black and white, just like has happened every time before. And sure enough, we start with these black and white ties. But then it starts shifting to color. And I'm like, hey, what's going on here? And then we pull away from the ties, this whole lavish home that's being inventoried and packed away. Yeah. And we piece together this is Saul's house after he's run off, right? He realizes he's in danger from every angle and just takes whatever money he can grab and gets out of town. And so
is it Saul's house though? Because wasn't he in an apartment? That's why I was confused by this.
In Better Call Saul is an apartment.
No. No. So the very first episode, like the very, very first episode.
First episode of what?
Better Call Saul. Like
Better Call
pilot,
Saul? Okay.
Pilot episode. It was a black and white scene. He was in an apartment.
Gene is in an apartment.
Who is?
Gene, future Saul, in black and white, is in an apartment.
Yeah. But
Saul Goodman, the successful lawyer, had a big fancy house that he had to run away from and became Gene. And so the big fancy house that was left behind,
yes.
That's what we're seeing in that opening sequence. And it doesn't seem to be law enforcement. It didn't seem like they were like taking fingerprints. No one had any kind of official badges on. So I don't know if it was maybe just an auction that was happening after the fact, or if maybe Gus sent people to clean it up. It seemed like too big of an operation to be a total secret criminal activity. Yeah. But it didn't seem to exactly be a legal, law enforcement act. Maybe the law enforcement had already gone through and taken inventory and gotten pictures and fingerprints and stuff. But I'm not 100% sure on what that scenario was. But I am 100% sure that was Saul Goodman's house.
That makes sense. So going over the scene, I loved how they shot it in slow motion. They had a lot of like just one shot scenes like this, a camera that followed somebody for a minute or two. I had to like go back, like after watching it the first time, I was like, wait, was that all one shot? It wasn't, but it was almost one shot. Like there was
They did it
multiple.
well enough to make it seem like it was.
Exactly. But they went from like his bedroom to the closet, which he had like a secret compartment to look like, and they knew about it because they opened it up. To upstairs to downstairs. His poster, like a picture of him, Saul Goodman, was in the water, and they picked it up and tossed it out in an outside garbage can. Which I don't know if that's symbolic. I assume it could be. That his life went to shit. His life is in the garbage.
Yeah.
But at the very, very end, they roll what looked like a desk or dresser up onto a moving vehicle, and something falls out of it, which looked like an acorn. I know it wasn't an acorn, but they pan onto it. I actually saw a picture of like this for a wine bottle.
It's a tequila bottle.
Yes.
It's a tequila bottle. It's the same tequila. It's come up a couple times, if I remember correctly. There was one scene early on.
Have a good day. Love a bear. Love a bear. Just saying hi. But anyways, sorry.
Hi.
Okay.
There was a scene earlier on in Better Call Saul. I wish I could remember for sure, but it's probably around season 2 when Jim convinces Kimmy to run this scam with him at a bar, and they basically talk this douchey business guy into buying them expensive tequila. And now it was a bottle cap of the tequila bottle. And if I remember right, eventually, another spoiler here, if you're worried, close your ears for 15 seconds, but eventually Gus kills Eladio and all those senior cartel members by poisoning them with that same tequila.
Ah, interesting. I'm curious on like the significance of if it's supposed to be like a reference to the past / the future that we know of, or if it's something completely different that is going to be connected later on in the episodes.
I think it's a couple things. One, I think it's to help clarify that this is Saul's house.
Yeah.
2, it might be to indicate. By the way, I want to point out that thing appeared one other time when Kim quit her job at I think it was at Clifford of Maine, or whatever the firm she was working for when she quit her job to do the pro bono work. Before she left, I think she gave instructions to a secretary or someone like, "Hey, clean out my office. Let me know this. I'm quitting." Kind of suddenly she did it. But before she left, she opened a drawer and pulled out that bottle cap.
Okay.
And I don't know for sure if it's the exact same bottle cap, right? But maybe it's just that's the tequila Saul drinks all the time. But even if that's the tequila Saul drinks all the time, why do you think that's the tequila Saul? It's definitely a memento, a reminder of his relationship with Kim. I wonder. It didn't seem clear to me that Kim was living in that house with Saul, right? That we didn't see any women's clothing. Maybe she got it all out before this went down. Maybe she's dead or in jail. I don't know. Maybe they just didn't show us the women's closet.
Actually, do you think it's a foreshadow of Kim's death, or?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that she might die, but I don't think that was a foreshadowing of it.
Right. Well, like why would they purposely put this in? Like, I feel like they're
remind us. They want to remind us. It's a motif. It's something that's come up several times, and here it is again. It's helping us tie it all together.
That makes sense. Which is, I love how they just put, especially on like sometimes like the intro scenes, attention to detail that will come up later or references to the past. Like they just don't accidentally put it in there. There's always a reason.
Yes.
There
was a few other things in there too. I need to watch it again to be more sure of stuff and to find more things because there's new things are coming out. Do you remember there's a scene when it starts to be realized by everyone that Jimmy was representing Lalo, and the way that went down at first is that Lalo had a false identity, and Jimmy knew really who he was, but was playing dumb and didn't have a lot of choice. He's kind of being forced into this by the cartel, and so he's just doing the best of what he's got. Gets Lalo out of jail, but then Lalo skips bail.
Yeah,
and people start to realize, like, wait, that guy was actually a criminal mastermind, and we just let him go, and it's kind of Jimmy's fault. Jimmy even slips up and calls him Lalo instead of El Guzman at one point. So the cops and a DA are kind of piecing it together. And as this happens, he starts to turn into a pariah around the courthouse, right? People who were friendly with him before, people who he would chat or flirt with or would do him little favors, now they're giving him the cold shoulder.
Yep.
You remember this?
Yes. Yes.
And at one point he went to the woman at the counter try to change a court date. She was like, "Mm-hmm, whatever," wouldn't listen to him, and he's
Yeah.
like, "Oh, but look," and he brought up that little doll, that little graduation doll.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was in
Yeah.
one of the boxes being cleared out in the house in the opening scene.
Ah, interesting.
I'm sure there's more. That's just
Yeah.
one I noticed. But
I
just
like how you like, cause I didn't even think
the
about.
book. They make it a point of the H.G. Wells book at one point. The camera zeroed in on that. That was on Jimmy's nightstand when he went to bed one time too.
Ah.
So I guarantee you there's more, but just I'm sure it's full of little
Yeah.
clues and Easter eggs that aren't necessarily foreshadowing Kim's death or anything, but they make it clear that that's
He's not here
Saul's
there.
house, and they kind of tie together all kinds of things that are going on.
So I do like how, like, I would have never thought, at least at off the top, oh, that's Kim's thing, or wait, isn't Kim's thing's not there, which because they did focus on the closet, they did like a pan of like all the clothes and shoes.
One of the closets.
One of the closets. That's true. But you assume it's the master closet and all that, which you would think they would share, but it's just that's interesting. By the way, this is interesting, this is like how in depth, and we're going to like try to hit on more of this next week when we dive into episode 1 and possibly episode 2 and all. I want to go like by scene per se, like the general idea of what they were trying to convey in that scene, what's the importance of, because when you make a scene in general, you don't want it to be a bland scene or pointless scene like that you just can take it out. You should always have a reason to make a scene. Just in general, that's just like an important factor of film in general, and we're just going to dive into each of those scenes, next week.
Especially in this show where sometimes it seems like they take a really long time to show a very basic thing. Sometimes it seems like there wasn't even any dialogue or nothing even happened, but they're doing it for a reason. They always have a reason. There's always some sort of meaning or clue or symbolism behind it. I know we're kind of wanting to put off talking about this current episode before we like fill in more, but I want to point out an example of that. A couple of things that I've pieced together that seemed a little confusing in this most current episode. By the way, we'll throw a bone to anyone who was hoping to hear about the most current episode. What was this is episode 5?
I think it was episode 5. Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty sure
episode 5 of the final season, and there was a moment when Gus was at the restaurant, and kind of typical, making sure everything's up to snuff, and a line is forming, so he walks up to the counter to help check someone out, which again, like many times, shows that nothing's really beneath Gus. He's willing to like do the dirty work, and even outside like his criminal enterprise, he's a good manager of the restaurant, and maybe it also helps sell his alter ego when he's that in it, and the guy's going through his order, and Gus recommends the spicy curls, and then suddenly there's a shift in tone. Suddenly, like the guy kind of blurs a little, the music, the audio fades a little, and it was very good filmmaking to let us know that something's going on in Gus's mind. And then it cuts to him like walking out to the parking lot and looking around.
Actually, no, it cuts to something breaking.
Someone drops something in the background. Kind of
but
breaks
then,
the moment up a little. Even that is a little out of sorts for the tight ship that Gus runs.
Exactly.
But remember, we got a moment in the prior episode where Gus is complaining to Mike about, because Mike and Gus have set up all kinds of surveillance because they're worried about Lalo. They're worried Lalo's going to show up and try to kill Gus or whatever. And so they've got all kinds of surveillance going on, including a plant at the restaurant that Mike has. But Gus is like, well, this guy's not good enough of a worker. Like I appreciate that you want to have surveillance in my work, but I need someone who's a good worker. I bet anything that guy that dropped something was someone that Gus wouldn't normally have hired. Someone that was there for Mike to help keep an eye on everything. But so anyway, it cuts,
interesting.
Again, showing how things tie together, and every little thing has some kind of meaning. So then Gus goes outside and kind of look around a parking lot, and I think that I'm sure that this is at least partly demonstrating Gus is sort of paranoid, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
We see it a bunch of times. By the way, another little tangent. There's another beautiful moment here when you account for how they're using color. When Gus was getting ready,
Hmm.
a couple times they made a point of him like checking he has a gun and a holster around his
Hmm.
ankle. They've made a point of showing
Yes.
us that a couple times. And he has a rack of jackets hanging up,
Hmm.
like in a sort of a closet, and they're color coordinated, okay? And it's kind of fading from like, I don't know, yellow to green to blue to red to orange or whatever, And blue is right in the middle. The blue colored ones are right in the middle. And he moves those out of the way to look in the mirror. So he
Ooh,
had to get that blue out of the way to see himself.
that's awesome.
Right? But anyway, that's a little tangent. Although it is important, I wanted to point out the gun thing in the holster.
Yeah.
So it shows he's kind of paranoid when he looks around out there. But I think what was happening, that sequence there, was, if you remember, I need to go back and watch the episode to get the details better. But there was a scene through Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. There's this European company called Madrigal they've worked with for like distributing drugs and materials or whatever, right?
Right.
And at one point, Gus met with, I think it's that same woman that was in Breaking Bad, and like a hotel as part of a business meeting about the restaurant, but it was a cover to meet about the drug coordination, the drug trafficking. And part of that moment when he was meeting with this European company was to launch the spicy curls for the restaurant. It was like a big new business initiative that he had
Yeah.
when he was meeting with this European drug trafficker. And so when this guy says spicy curls, I think it clicked. I think he made the connection in his mind that Lalo is going to track down Werner's family and Werner's workers. Lalo is probably in. The reason no one has seen any scene of him is because he's probably in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
I think Gus is figuring that out. And sure enough, we see Lalo in Europe tracking down through Werner. Lalo is fixated on what Gus is doing.
Yeah.
He's trying to find proof, even if he can't find proof that Gus set up the hit on him, he still can find proof that Gus is doing something outside of the cartel's control. And his lead right now is this Werner guy, so he goes to Germany. I think that Gus is thinking ahead and realizes that that's what Lalo's doing. Lalo's going to come back knowing about the lab being built.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a showdown there. And that's why Gus went down there. You remember that whole
Yes.
It was another
Yes.
scene. It was
Yes.
like, what's even happened? He just went down there. He like picked up a cable. He like took some steps
Mm.
and then hit his gun and
Yeah.
the tractor wheel.
Oh, I thought that was
he is-
foreshadowed. That's where Lalo's going to get killed.
Yeah, I think Gus is planning ahead to a showdown with Lalo there. And I think that it's very symbolic that Gus took the gun from his ankle to put there.
Mm-hmm.
Because he knows he's not in danger otherwise now. He was keeping that gun around with him all the time,
He thought he was in
paranoid
danger.
over his shoulder all the time. But now he realizes, look, Lalo's in Germany. I'm not in danger right now. I won't be in danger until we have this showdown at the lab. He could have brought a separate gun. He could have kept the gun in his ankle and put a different gun down there. But he took the one off his ankle to put into the tractor because he's not worried outside of this lab anymore. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Like, and that's the type of like
detail
that they're telling the story with it. You start off by saying like everything is in these scenes for a reason. They can't just have Gus say this out loud. Like Gus figuring this out, like who would even say it to? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Like it would be a very contrived conversation. It would be hard to convey. So they convey it through Gus's actions with a scene that seems boring and meaningless, but it was actually very telling and very important and very impactful.
Mm-hmm. So another thing, this is like obviously this is the latest episodes. Something I realized, it was like an eye opener possibly for me, was so you have Howard and Jimmy in the boxing ring, which it was just a fun scene, seeing all the colors because it's such an obvious thing, but still, it was really fun. But after the scene, Howard goes and goes to a private eye, and he's like, follow Saul, which I don't know why, but I wasn't expecting. And then my brain like started having a million thoughts. I'm like, I thought Howard was safe. I just assumed Howard was safe. I have a feeling he's going to get mixed up in something he doesn't even realize, or he's going to find something, may get killed for it. I don't know that 100%, but I never even planned it. Like I just assumed Howard was safe, just let you know. And now made me think that, can he be safe? Is he going to, because why would they set this up? I mean, obviously they can, because of how the story and all that, but I feel like there's something that's going to happen that's going to get Howard involved in something he's not supposed to be involved in.
Think about what happened last episode. Mike and Kimmy finally meet for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
She is on to someone
yes,
following
I thought that was
her.
awesome.
She thinks it's the cops. She confronts them. So then, since it wasn't the cops, it was Mike's guys. Now Mike has to confront her and say, look, I've got someone following you. Lalo's not dead. I'm trying to make sure. I don't think he's coming for you. You probably don't need to worry about it, but just in case, I'm trying to cover all the bases.
Yep.
Okay? So we know that Mike has someone following Jimmy and Kim.
Yep.
Now Howard has someone following Jimmy.
And we know Lalo's out there too. We assume Lalo's end goal is Gus, but he's still a wild card for some of the other characters like Saul and Kim. And
I don't think he'll go after them, but he might use them to find out about Gus.
Exactly.
But Lalo aside, I just think that the guys that Mike has following Jimmy and the guys that Howard has following Jimmy
could get mixed
are
up.
Likely in one way or the other to get mixed up with each other. And whether that draws Howard into it, whether someone dies over it, whether or not it makes Kimmy have to run away or gets her implicated.
You just can't. Maybe would Howard, if he even knew the information, like he's completely safe, but he knows the information, like what would he do with it? Would he try to side with Jimmy? I don't think he would, especially since he's like supposed to be like this good person and Jimmy's doing bad things, color wise. I'm talking about we know he's like Howard's supposed to be the good person. So what would he do with information like that? Would he just bust Jimmy and Kim? And I don't know,
which information? What
the realizing that Jimmy's pretty much with Gus and all them.
I think that at this point Howard would side with Jimmy. You remember the scene when the DA,
I think that too,
the assistant DA, that woman, I think her name is Suzanne, that there was one scene when Jimmy trapped her in an elevator to negotiate cases, and then in a prior season, she, or maybe last episode or whatever, she met with Kim to say, this is my theory. She's like, I think that Jimmy got in over his head. I think that he knows this all was a bad guy, but he got kind of coerced into representing him, and I'm worried it might get worse for him, and I think you might know something about what's going on. We can help, how can we work out of this?
Yeah.
And Kim was like, I don't know what you're talking about. You talk about Jimmy in the past. I'm not helping you, But my point is that I think that the law, Howard, the DA, whoever, they understand that Jimmy didn't go out, find a drug dealer that was a murderer and decide to be his lawyer and cover up his crimes. The drug dealer murderer went to Jimmy and forced him in, if Jimmy had said no to Lalo, what do you think happens next?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
He's kind of being coerced into this. And I think the law understands that this kind of scenario works and would at least attempt to help Jimmy out.
Yeah.
The problem is, and I think Kim knew it, they can't. That Lalo's too good. They're in deeper than the law realizes. Also, they're in deeper than she wants to admit.
Just not Lalo, but Gus. Gus wouldn't allow that.
And the other Salamancas and Bolsa and whoever all else.
And that's why. And we know obviously in the future that the law doesn't know who they are, or at least who Gus is. So, if Howard knew this information, there's a chance he would die. At least if he decided,
or have to go into hiding.
Oh, that too. Yeah, exactly.
That's where I wonder if Kim might also go into hiding like Jimmy.
Yeah.
She might not. These characters don't necessarily have to die.
That's true. That's true. But yeah, a lot of answers, to be answered. But yeah. Anyways, we will dive more into the season. Like I said, scene by scene, foreshadows and all that stuff. How they use color. Next week.
By the way, anyone out there who's watching this, if you appreciate it, let us know.
Yeah,
if you have questions, let us know.
And
I
we'll
don't know
go
if there's
over
a good way to contact you, Flint, but it'd be great if you follow me on Twitter. I'm Dancing Sean. I'm also on YouTube, Dancing Sean. And if you send me a message, I'll do my best to maybe answer directly or cover it in the next episode that we have.
I have a Discord, and I'll make a special spot for questions for Better Call Saul that we could cover if you wanna. If you do have questions, just put your questions in there, and we'll be sure to answer them.
Also, any other insights or examples that anyone finds about how they use color?
Mhm.
And I didn't go into it this time. I feel like we're wrapping up, but I feel like eventually I should distinguish, and I should clarify here at least, that it's not the same colors from Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. They have a different use of them between the two shows.
That's true.
Anyway.
But anyways, thank you all for watching, and we will see you next week. We'll probably do it on Wednesday, if not Thursday. It's always Wednesday or Thursday. But anyways, we will see you then. Bye-bye.